have to ask yourself something before this story begins. How does a man who spent 31 years inside the Central Intelligence Agency, who rose from a field officer running assets in Bogota and Guadalajara to the director of the most powerful intelligence organization on Earth, how does that man end up with a secret room in his private estate containing $5.3 billion in documented payments from the organization he spent his career hunting? How does the person who authorized drone strikes on cartel leadership, who sat in the Situation Room and briefed the president on Sinaloa's operational structure, who publicly called the cartel the single greatest organized crime threat to American national security, how does he end up on their payroll? That is not a rhetorical question. The FBI has a specific answer. And the answer is more disturbing than the question. On the morning of April 2nd, 2026, federal agents executed a search warrant at the private estate of former CIA Director William Harlan Cross in Middleburg, Virginia. Cross had served as Director of Central Intelligence for 6 years before retiring 18 months ago. He was 68 years old. He had received the Distinguished Intelligence Medal, the National Security Medal, and a Presidential Commendation. He had testified before Congress 47 times. He had a memoir on the New York Times bestseller list. And according to the federal indictment unsealed the same morning as the raid, he had been receiving structured payments from a Sinaloa Cartel financial network for at least 11 of his 31 years at the agency, including the 6 years he served as its director. The room the FBI found was not on any architectural plan filed with Loudoun County. It was accessed through a concealed door in the estate's private library, behind a section of paneled shelving that swung outward when a specific sequence was activated through a hidden mechanism in the desk. The room measured 14 feet by 18 feet. It had independent climate control, a dedicated power supply backed by a private generator, a Faraday cage lining in the walls that blocked all electronic signals from entering or leaving, and a communication system built around custom encrypted hardware that had been designed, according to forensic analysts who examined it, by someone with deep knowledge of intelligence tradecraft, knowledge of exactly how the CIA detects and intercepts covert communication. Inside the room, agents found 6 fireproof safes. Inside those safes were the $5.3 billion in financial documentation, 17 years of classified CIA operational files that Cross had removed from secure agency systems over the course of his career, and a handwritten operational log that covered 11 years of his relationship with the cartel's financial coordinator. The log was written in a personal cipher. It took the FBI's cryptanalysis unit 4 days to fully decode it. What it contained, according to the indictment, was a systematic record of every interaction, every payment, every piece of intelligence Cross had provided to the cartel, and every operational decision he had influenced on the cartel's behalf during his tenure. To understand what Cross allegedly sold and what the cartel allegedly bought, you need to understand what a CIA director actually controls. The director does not merely analyze intelligence. The director shapes collection priorities, deciding which targets the agency's human intelligence networks focus on and which targets are deprioritized. The director approves covert action findings, the classified legal authorizations for operations that never appear in any public record. The director has visibility into the operational details of every significant intelligence program the United States is running anywhere in the world. And the director briefs the president, which means the director knows what the president knows about threats, about operations, and about what the intelligence community is and is not watching at any given moment. A cartel that can influence a CIA director does not merely buy advance warning about raids. It buys the ability to shape the intelligence environment in which it operates. It buys the power to redirect the most capable intelligence apparatus in the world away from its own activities. It buys, in the most fundamental sense, invisibility. The FBI's investigation began not at the CIA, but at a Miami bank. In the fall of 2024, when a currency transaction flagged by FinCEN's automated monitoring system identified an unusual pattern of structured wire transfers from a Cayman Islands account into a series of domestic investment vehicles. The Cayman account was registered to a trust whose beneficial ownership, after a court-ordered disclosure, traced through a chain of nominee holders to a Delaware holding company. That holding company owned 4 properties. One of them was a condominium in Miami Beach. One was a horse farm in Middleburg, Virginia. and one was registered to a trust that, after additional forensic accounting work, connected to entities associated with William Harlan Cross. The FBI opened a full counterintelligence investigation in January 2025. They spent 14 months building the case before they moved. What those 14 months of investigation produced, beyond the financial trail, was a reconstruction of specific CIA decisions and operations that prosecutors argue were influenced by Cross's relationship with the cartel. The indictment identifies 7 specific instances over a 6-year period in which Cross's actions as director produced outcomes that directly benefited Sinaloa operations. In 3 cases, proposed covert action findings targeting Sinaloa Gulf Coast financial networks were drafted by CIA operational planners, submitted for Cross's approval, and returned rejected with notations that the operational risk was too high or the intelligence basis was insufficient. CIA officers who worked on those proposals, interviewed during the FBI investigation, stated that Cross's rejections were inconsistent with the evidentiary standards he applied to comparable operations targeting other organizations. In 2 cases, human intelligence assets who were reporting on Sinaloa financial operations from inside the cartel structure were burned, their identities compromised within weeks of being identified in classified briefing materials that Cross reviewed. Both assets were killed. The indictment stops short of directly charging Cross with their deaths, but includes the circumstances in the pattern of conduct it alleges. In the remaining 2 cases, Cross is accused of providing the cartel's financial coordinator with advance notice of Treasury Department sanctions actions that would have frozen cartel-linked accounts, allowing the funds to be moved before the sanctions took effect. Cross was in his private library when agents arrived. He did not resist. He did not appear surprised. He asked to make one phone call, which his attorneys later confirmed was to a former CIA general counsel. He has said nothing publicly since his arrest. His legal team released a statement calling the allegations false and politically motivated and promising a vigorous defense. Former intelligence officials who worked under Cross have responded with a range of reactions, some expressing disbelief, others noting privately that certain decisions made during his tenure had always struck operational officers as inexplicable in ways that now, in retrospect, carry a different weight. The classified operational files recovered from the secret room represent a separate and, in some ways, more immediately serious problem than the criminal charges. 17 years of files, removed from secure agency systems over the course of a career, covering operations and assets and collection programs that in some cases are still active. The CIA's Damage Assessment Center has been activated. The National Security Council has been briefed. Intelligence, liaison, relationships with allied services whose operations appear in those files are being reviewed. The question of how much of what was in that room was shared with the cartel's network, and through that network, potentially with other foreign intelligence services the cartel maintains relationships with, including elements connected to the Mexican government and potentially to Chinese and Russian intelligence, is a question the damage assessment will attempt to answer. It will take months. The answer, if it is what investigators fear it might be, will be classified at the highest possible level. Cross faces 16 federal counts. Espionage, for the removal and potential disclosure of national defense information. Conspiracy to commit espionage, bribery of a public official, money laundering, covering 11 years of structured payments through the cartel's financial network, obstruction of justice, based on evidence that Cross attempted to destroy communication records in the 48 hours before the raid, a period during which investigators believe he may have been warned that federal attention was moving toward him, making false statements in his post-retirement security debriefing, in which he was asked about any foreign contacts or relationships that might represent a counterintelligence concern and denied having any. And the count that will define this case in the history books, acting as an agent of a foreign criminal organization while serving as the director of Central Intelligence, a charge that has never before been brought against a sitting or former director of any American intelligence agency. The damage Cross allegedly did over 11 years cannot be undone. The assets who died cannot be brought back. The operations that were rejected or redirected cannot be retroactively executed. The funds that were moved before the sanctions hit are gone. What the FBI's investigation can do, what the prosecution can do, is establish the public record of what happened, hold the person responsible, accountable under the law, and force the institutional reckoning that the CIA and the broader intelligence community now faces. How does a director get compromised and stay compromised for 11 years without detection? What oversight mechanisms failed? Who else knew or suspected and said nothing? Those questions do not have answers yet. They are the questions that congressional intelligence committees and internal CIA accountability structures will spend the next several years trying to answer. The investigation continues. This is Federal Watch Network.